Hi, this is Tino with Bluesy News, and I'm here with Aspen Pittman, the current chair of the Hollywood Sapphire Group. Is it the oldest recording organization?
Probably the oldest functioning group of audio engineers in the country. Started by Les Paul in the 40s and Bill Putnam and a lot of the early guys in recording. It was started really early 40s, and the first official meeting we had, I think, was in the 46 range. But yeah, it's certainly the oldest. It founded the AES several years later, that group.
Interesting. We are at Aspen's place here in San Fernando Valley, and we're going to talk about several things, a tremendous piece of equipment that he invented. But first off, your background. I mean, what got you here today? I mean, I think it started in the 60s with the very first Guitar Center.
Yeah, well, actually, in high school, I was president of the folk music club. I was a folk singer and had aspirations. Hitchhiked to New York out of high school, played the basket houses, hitchhiked back. Didn't make a lot of money at that, and basically had to go to work for a living. In high school, I delivered organs for a company that was called Organ Center in Van Nuys, and they had started a guitar company for selling guitar products. The same group that owned Keys to Music owned the Organ Center in Hollywood, and they became the distributor of Vox products, which is an interesting story all of it in itself. But that's pretty much where I started. I was the only guy pretty much. It was manned by older organ guys, and they didn't have anybody there that could basically tune a guitar or talk to the guys that were coming in that were my age. And so I started at the Guitar Center in early '67. Having graduated high school in '66, went to New York, came back, looking for a job, started at Guitar Center.
And you opened the very first store.
Well, I didn't open it. I was an employee. But I became sales manager of that store within about 6 months. I took to it. And was pretty much floor manager for the rest of my several years there until I went on to do some other things. But yeah, that was
now your recording background. Was there a college you went to? Was it the School of Hard Knocks?
Yeah, basically School of Hard Tape at that time. And the background was, as a musician, you played around with recording. I think I had a 4-track TAC 3340S, which was standard operating procedure back then. A couple of mics that went right into the tape deck, no mixer, and did my own recording. Had some of that sort of thing, but again, having not really made it as a contract or something like that, went to work in a music store. But after many years in a music store, I developed a sense of products and developing and marketing, and I got more actively involved in the manufacture and development and design. I left the retail business, went to work for a big manufacturer of guitar amps called Acoustic. They actually made bass amps. The Doors were using them, and so after 5 or 6 years in retail music, and I'd pretty much reached the top levels at Guitar Center, I went on to become a rep for the acoustic company, and I did artist relations, traveled with bands, and developed products with engineering. And after many years of that, started my company in '79, which was Groove Tubes, and it was founded on an idea of providing a higher quality replacement tube, much like the higher quality string or a guitar pickup, which had become, market segments, and the tubes hadn't yet become a market segment, and most companies are trying to get away from tubes, and I ran towards them because they sounded better, and that was pretty much a preaching to the choir moment for me. I figured out the product that I could sell. I could learn to match certain musically meaningful factors in the way tubes worked. So a lot like you tune a piano or tune a guitar, I was tuning guitar amps, and that started in basically the mid-'70s, and I actually started Groove Tubes, I think, late '78. So '79 was pretty much our first official year where we paid taxes and had a product that took off, and it did really well. I wrote a book called The Tube Amp Book.
And what year? Yeah, what year did the book?
The book first came out in the very early. Well, it started as a pamphlet. Just I was answering so many questions every day on the telephone. I decided to put together a little pamphlet. We'd send them out to dealers, 32-page thing. talked about how to change tubes, why to change tubes, what tubes went in a Fender amp and a Marshall amp, just starting to get the knowledge base going that would help propel my product line and ultimately the industry that has become replacement tubes is a pretty big piece of the pie right now. And it started out as 32 pages, and that would have been probably about 81, I think 2 years after I opened, or maybe even 1980, I probably had that first one out. It grew, and the first real book came out in about 83 or 84, where it was an actual 300 or 400 page book. And it started out probably more like about 150 and grew into version 1, version 2, version 3 to the book it is today, which is the large hardback deluxe revised edition. And it's, 300 color pages, and it has a lot of schematics. It has a DVD with 800 tube amps, guitar schematics on it, so guys can learn about their amp, how to tune it. Still the same basic stuff about, why to change tubes, how to change tubes.
It's a large coffee table.
It is now. That's been for the last maybe 5-6 years. That's the embodiment of it.
And where can people get a hold of it?
That's on Amazon.com.
Amazon.
You can buy one on Amazon. You can buy one on our website, Aspen Associates website, which all link through Aspen Place Recording and also Centerpoint Stereo, another one. They all kind of link together. And they're a $50 cover, and I think we sell them for $35, mostly $35, $40 online.
It's a good-looking book, too.
It is. It's been really successful. I've sold over 140,000 copies, which pretty much qualifies it as a bestseller.
Nice.
And interesting, there are that many people that are interested in tube amps and making them better.
Between solid state and tube, what's the market share of tube amp?
Well, at the professional level, it's pretty much all tube.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And I think you could also say price point. Tube amps are more expensive to build. They have additional components. They have another extra transformer. They have the tubes themselves. The tubes require a socket. So there's a lot of extra parts compared to just a little transistor that might do the job. But musicians have never given up on tube amps. Fender released probably a half a dozen solid state attempts at replacing their tube line. And they all pretty much fizzled, and they still make the amp they were making back in the early 50s and the 60s, the Tweed era, the Blackface era, that have become the inspiration for, literally probably hundreds of other companies who've copied those designs, including Marshall. Marshall amplifiers started out as a copy of a Fender amp. They copied the Tweed era basement, and they just separated the head from the cabinet. And so Fender copied the RCA applications manual. When RCA was a big provider of tubes in those days, and they had an applications manual that tell you how to lay out a circuit, how to make a preamp design, how to make a power amp design, and they're right out of the book. There's nothing really rocket science about it. The guitar amp business, and with some also size, is the hi-fi business. Hi-fi guys still like tubes. But the guitar amp business, probably the biggest part of it, is still growing. It's not shrinking. It's an expanding market, and tubes have pretty much been obsolete for every other part of the market. Used to have TV cameras with tubes.
Correct.
And also recorders with tubes. That's pretty much gone away. But the guitar player likes the tube because it has a natural, he has a natural built-in reference for naturalness and sound, and we could get into talking about that because I have my own theories about that. And tubes provide that. Transistors are somehow lacking a little bit in color. I compare it a lot to an incandescent light that has all the, speaking to a camera guy, has all the lights there versus a neon light, which is more efficient, costs less money to run, but doesn't have red in it. And so people look pretty washed out and ghosty. Correct. In fluorescence. And it's much like that with music. I think it's more of a dynamic issue with a guitar player. They describe guitar amps as warm. Correct. As compared to, and warmth is a dynamic word. A lot of measurements have been made over the years to try and explain what people think is the reason. And I discredit a lot of those because a very wise guy once said to me, there's a lot of things that you can measure that don't matter, and there's a lot of things that matter that you can't measure.